Hi everyone and welcome along. Today we're going to paint a lovely loose watercolour landscape scene of some egrets on a marsh. Egrets are birds, beautiful white birds, so we're going to actually use some masking fluid to mask out the egret. But what I want to do is I want to just create some horizontal lines on the piece. That's not even very horizontal, but it doesn't really matter. Just some places where I'm going to sort of place some marshes and reeds, and I'm going to put the egret, well, I'm going to put a few in actually. I'm going to draw one. They've got these amazing sort of almost like question mark necks. Oops. They're rather beautiful birds, and I'm going to have another one slightly more in the distance. There we go. So I'm going to first paint these in masking fluid, and then we can do our washes. Okay, so those two birds have been painted with masking fluid, just if anyone's not sure what that is. It's a liquid masking, it's a masking fluid, there is no better way to describe it. But it masks off the shapes you want, meaning you can paint over the top and leave the white relief once you peel it off. Okay, so I've got my mop brush here, and I'm just creating a sky colour. I'm just messing around with, I've got French ultramarine blue and a bit of moon glow. My French ultramarine blue is quite grainy, so I have to be a bit careful with it, but I quite like that colour. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint, yeah, that's the only thing, when you have little grains you've got to be careful about the streaks, but I don't mind, I'm quite happy with that. So the mop brush is doing its thing, getting the page nice and wet, but just making sure that we're not leaving puddles of water on the page. We want to make sure we've got a nice even coverage. You can get this mop brush in my shop, it's rather good. Okay, and now it's time to start building our picture. So I want to create some marshes, so we want some nice sort of tan colours as well as our greens, so I'm just waking up the yellow ochre. This is all sort of thought out that the timing wise means I'm just letting the wash seep in. It's going to remain wet on the page for quite a good amount of time, but I do want it to just settle in a little bit. So I'm getting green, gold and yellow ochre. Those feel like good marsh colours. And what I'm going to do with my size 8 brush is I'm going to create a bank of colour along that first line, and I'm going to, I mean the colours are quite similar, aren't they? There we go, get a bit more variation in there. And I'm sort of deciding to making it sort of a broader line from here, and it's tapering off to nothing. Now I rather like that, but I want to get in just a little bit of darkness on it, so I'm going to add just a little bit of Payne's grey along the base. And then I'm going to create another line, but I'm going to take this one, I'm going to create a sort of another bit on that side as well. The idea is I want that egret to sort of emerge from it, I guess. It's also good to have a good contrast when you've got your masked areas, so I'm making sure that the Payne's grey is really standing out there. Can always add in some extra little bits if you like. So this is kind of fun. We're just building up the colour whilst it's damp, and then I'm going to put in one last one, sort of down along the front, just along this line here. And you can see it spreads up and out of its own accord as long as the page is wet enough, but there's going to come a point where we're going to start doing a little bit of this as the page dries slowly, but we're not quite there yet, I don't think. But I think it is important to pop in. The Payne's grey feels a bit extreme, but trust me, it does dry a lot lighter. Now I'm going to take this blue colour, I might just get a little bit more on the brush, and I might just sort of add in a few extra streaks of it. Trying not to disturb the reeds we've already put in. You see, like, I don't really want to disturb it too much. But that's rather nice. We're going to let that dry 100% now, and then we'll come back in and do some detail. I've mixed up darker versions of the colours. So for the yellow ochre colour, I've mixed up burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and a little bit of Payne's grey. And for the green gold colour, I've mixed up sap green, green gold, and a little bit of Payne's grey. And what I'm doing now is I'm using the rigger brush in the foreground, because the foreground is going to be the most precise and detailed bit of section. So I am creating reeds with the rigger brush just from sort of flicking up the brush and then what I want to do is take size 2, a little bit of Payne's grey, not too much because it's so strong, and I want to just use the brush sort of angled quite low to the page to it's sort of bringing together the base of the reeds whilst also creating just a little bit of water ripple down the front. Now the reason I did the foreground first is because that's going to be the one with the most detail in it, and then I just love how that has sort of clouded up and then we sort of see the reeds behind it, because now I'm going to continue to paint in reeds in the next reed bed, but they're going to be just a little bit less full on. They're going to be a little fainter, a little bit smaller. Do add a few sort of just, poking out of the water, but they're very much behind the ones in the foreground. Normally well, I don't know, it's different times you paint the foreground last. Now we're coming up to the egret. I am going to keep the masking fluid on for the moment, even though I want these reeds to very much overlap over the top of it. What I'm going to do is I want to do a first layer of some reeds, and then we'll take the masking fluid off and we will then add just a few more over the top. I added again a few Payne's grey sweeps side to side, and now what I'm going to do for these reeds at the back here, I'm going to be quite sparing. I'm not going to paint in nearly as many as I did here. And again with the egret, I will make sure that once the masking fluid has been peeled away, we will pop some in over the top. So it's really not that many required, and the Payne's grey again will just be nice and gentle, but it's a lovely way of helping set the scene. So I've angled my brush quite low to the page, and if it's a little bit dry texture, that's great. And then right up at the back, we're not going to do any reeds, but I will just do a little bit just have it disappearing off like that. Okay, we'll let that dry. Actually down here we can probably get rid of the masking fluid now. Let's see. So I'm just using my finger to wake it up. There we go, here it comes. And you can start to rub it off. Lovely, look at that. I think we might need to wait a minute for that one, but how cool is that? Now the egrets are here with us, we need to paint in some of their details. So they've got a beautiful orange beak. So I've got some cadmium orange. And then just a little bit of a sort of diluted shadow mix, just to get a bit of nice texture on the feathers. But ultimately we want to really make the most of that lovely white that we've managed to keep. And then I'm going to just let that dry, and then we're going to put in a few more reeds just sort of in front of these birds, so it feels like they are much more in the landscape rather than just plonked on top of it. So I'm actually going to try doing this with my size 2 brush, because I want to make sure that the reeds are nice and sort of substantial. Then I also think that having a few in behind as well might be quite good. And a little bit more Payne's grey. of the piece as a whole, I think, will help. In the foreground, at least, anyway. And then the one in the background, we do want to make sure that our reeds are still sort of maintaining the kind of shape and style they had before. I think that works really nicely. Okay, so we need to let this dry 100%. We can peel off the paper and then we will rub out the pencil. But that's quite satisfying in itself, isn't it? I think I've got a new favourite colour combination as well with this yellow ochre and yellow ochre and green gold. It's just lovely. Yeah, so we'll let it dry and then we'll finish off by rubbing out the pencil. And there you have a rather lovely Egrets in a marsh landscape using wet on wet techniques and just some simple use of the rigger brush. Don't forget you can buy that in my shop on Etsy if you want, and it's a really fantastic brush to add to your collection. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you again next time.